Aston Martin dates back to 1921. It's fair to say it's had a checkered career. It was born out of racing. The name is derived from the Aston Clinton hill climb, where Lionel Martin, one of the company's founders, scored a class win in 1913. 1959 was Aston's zenith on the racetrack when it won the World Sports Car Championship and finished first and second in the Le Mans 24 Hours. But commercially it was never a great success. David Brown, the industrialist who owned Aston Martin for 26 years and gave its models the DB prefix, was once asked how you make a small fortune out of making British sports cars. His answer was you had to start with a large fortune. David Brown would have been stunned by the magnificent headquarters of Aston Martin today. It is at Gaydon in Warwickshire, 150 metres long, faced with warm Cotswold stone and furnished inside in cool marble. This is a car factory, an engineering workshop, administrative offices and a showroom, all rolled into one. More than 7,000 new Aston Martins came out of here last year. Despite, or perhaps because of, their role in so many James Bond films, Astons used to be a specialised purchase for British gentlemen of a certain age. Today's Astons have a younger appeal. They're beautiful and expensive, but still exclusive enough to be the cars of choice for the top sportsmen and the princes of pop. In a recent poll, Aston Martin was voted the UK's coolest brand. It's hard to imagine now what Aston Martin was like 20 years ago when the Ford Motor Company took control. That was largely on the whim of the late Henry Ford II. Mr. Ford didn't get much for his purchase. A single new car design and literally a cottage industry was based around a house in Newport Pagnell. Aston was declining. In 1992 it made only 127 cars. Aston needed a new design and it needed it quickly. Ford's top brass found a prototype that was to have been the Jaguar F-Type, but had been cancelled. Ian Callum had the job of designing a new body for it, so it could be turned into an Aston. The result was the DB7, which many people, myself included, regard as one of the world's most beautiful cars. The DB7 became the best-selling Aston of all time. It was smaller and less expensive than the old Aston V8s. The lower price was possible because a lot of the components and assemblies were brought in from suppliers. Among those contractors was Jaguar, also owned by Ford. Jaguar supplied the basic engine, a 3.2 litre six-cylinder that was supercharged to produce 335 brake horsepower. And they also provided some chassis parts from the ageing Jaguar XJS. As time went on, there was a DB7 convertible called the Volante, which wasn't as elegant as the coupe, but then in 1999, a 420 brake horsepower 6-litre V12 engine was squeezed into the space of the six-cylinder to create the DB7 Vantage. The V12 came out of Ford's advanced engineering department, but Aston does not like to be reminded that it was developed by joining together two Ford Mondeo V6s. This is the Vanquish. When Aston Martin had regained its confidence with the DB7, it started work on a new flagship model which would also use the V12 engine, uprated to 450 brake horsepower. As its name suggests, the Vanquish was intended to outrun the competition, which, when it was introduced in 2001, was the Ferrari 550 Maranello, which did 190 miles an hour. The muscular body was again the work of Ian Callum. Unlike the DB7, the Vanquish was to be hand-built in small numbers by craftsmen at the Newport Pagnell factory. But the surprise was the method of construction, which was more like an aircraft than a car. Instead of a steel platform chassis, the Vanquish had beams of extruded aluminium bonded together with a central backbone of carbon fibre. The body sides are glass fibre and the skin panels are aluminium, intricately shaped by a special superform process. There was also something new in the Vanquish transmission. It was an automated manual gearbox controlled by paddles behind the steering wheel. Gearships like this are quite common today, but what was in effect Formula One technology seemed daring just a few years ago. The Vanquish was launched by Dr. Ulrich Betz, a German engineer who had worked at BMW and Porsche and was appointed chief executive of Aston in 2000. Betz liked the aluminium construction of the Vanquish but thought it could be improved. He also hit on the idea of using the same basic chassis for a range of future models, which would not only save money and engineering resources but would also make Aston more independent. By doing that, Dr. Betz was able to reject Ford's plan for a smaller Aston to be a mid-engine two-seater, sharing most of its parts with a new Jaguar. The small Aston became the front-engined V8 Vantage instead. Aston's very own VH, which means vertical horizontal chassis, is made in the sparkling new Gaydon factory. The aluminium sheets and extrusions that make up the chassis are assembled on a jig. Epoxy adhesive is applied by Aston's first robot, which appropriately is known as James Bonder. Then the completed chassis is cured in a high temperature oven. It makes a light but stiff and strong structure. There's no automation on the assembly line, where skilled technicians put together suspension, hubs and brakes with loving care and install engines that have been built by their colleagues in Germany, where Aston has its own engine factory within the Ford plant at Cologne. Because they use the same chassis and a lot of other vital parts, Aston's 200 engineers were able to develop the DB9 and the V8 Vantage models at the same time. Development and testing today is a long way from the quick burst up the M1 motorway which used to suffice in the old days of Newport Pagnell. Aston uses all the techniques and procedures of the Ford world. This rig works the car's suspension over programmed routes, simulating some of the world's toughest roads. Aston has access to the Land Rover proving ground next to its Gaydon headquarters and the banked high-speed tracks of Millbrook in Bedfordshire and the Motor Industry Research Association near Nuneaton. A new Aston model has 1 million kilometres of testing before it reaches production, and that includes 45,000 miles of high-speed durability tests. The test programme includes 50 degrees extreme heat in Dubai, and ice driving in Arctic Finland. This looks like fun, but the temperature can be down to -30. The DB9 is another car that's so gorgeous you could forgive it anything, and perhaps you needed to, as the first cars were blighted by problems with their electrics and electronics. The DB9 is intended as a comfortable long-distance grand tourer rather than an out-and-out sports car, but as the DBR9 Racer has shown, it can make a good account of itself on the track. And even the standard car is good for 185 miles per hour. It's a 2+2 with rear seats that are well shaped but too small for anyone other than small children. And anyway, if you're going on that long continental journey, you'll need the space to supplement the rather small trunk. The cabin's luxuriously furnished in leather, and the centre console can be trimmed in various ways, including the intriguing novelty of bamboo strips. The dashboard and controls look great, but they're a bit fiddly to use. The instruments, with their faces designed to look like a chronograph watch, are a triumph of design over function. In all the latest Astons, you start the engine by pressing a glass button at the centre of the fascia. It's a nice piece of theatre as the V12 engine fires with a delicious bark from the exhaust. It quietens down when underway. Actually, it has to meet the noise regulations, and then at 4,000 RPM a valve in the exhaust system restores the glorious soundtrack. For the DB9, Aston continued with the press button transmission selectors and steering wheel paddles it had introduced on the Vanquish, but in the DB9 they operate a 6-speed automatic transmission. A conventional manual gearbox is also available, but the automatic better suits the smooth character of this car. The V8 Vantage is strictly a two-seater, with a shorter wheelbase than the DB9. It's a more focused sports car and it's pretty stiff over the bumps, but it handles beautifully. It's agile, responsive and well damped. A great driver's car. We can put this exemplary behaviour down to its even weight balance front to rear. Aston talks about this as a front mid-engine car, because the V8 engine is so far back in the chassis and the gearbox is just in front of the rear axle. For this engine, Aston returned to Jaguar. Although it's built by Aston, the 4.3 litre V8 is an enlarged, dry sump version of the engine that powers the Jaguar XK. It develops 380 brake horsepower, but it needs to be kept high in the rev range to get the best of its performance and the wonderful noise. The V8 Vantage can do 175 miles an hour and accelerates from 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds. It's a rival for the Porsche 911 Carrera S, but it's quite a lot more expensive and not quite as quick as the Porsche. Owners don't seem to mind that. This is, after all, the first Aston that could be bought for the price of a Porsche, so perhaps it's not a surprise there's a long waiting list for delivery. Heinrich Fisker took Ian Callum's place as Aston's chief designer when Callum went to Jaguar, and now Fisker has left to set up his own design and coach building company in the United States. Aston's new chief designer is Marek Reichman, who's in charge of an enlarged studio at Gaydon. There they have all the facilities to progress from sketches and package drawings to computer modelling and full-scale clay models. And right now they're working on the next generation of Aston Martins, the first of which will be the svelte, four-door, four-seat Rapide. And to follow that is a new flagship supercar, mysteriously codenamed DBX. Aston's moving into a new phase. The Vanquish has come to the end of the road and the old Newport Pagnell Works has been closed. The DBS has taken its place. It's a more powerful and more aggressive looking version of the DB9, which has adopted some of the character of the DBR9 race car. And of course it starred in the James Bond film Casino Royale. The bigger change is that Aston Martin has new owners. In August 2006, Ford, with big problems of its own in North America, put Aston up for sale. In March 2007, it was acquired by Q80 investors who appointed David Richards, the founder of the ProDrive racing and engineering business, as Aston's chairman. The first moves of the new owners were to extend Ulrich Betz's contract as chief executive for another 5 years, and to confirm that the four-door Rapide will go into production in 2009. So it looks as if Aston Martin is still heading in the right direction. Fast forward.
Up the inside of David Reynolds.